What's good, y'all? It's time for post-buff Lugaru review, as well as obviously there were a couple people that complained about the way I was testing the Nightmare faction units. And I'm just going to obviously show you a guild boss run, so stay tuned, and at the end you're going to see a guild boss run on how to take or how to make the most of your Lugaru, and he's going to slap, trust me. But enough of that, let's get into his kit post-buff Lugaru review. Here we go. So, first off, his talent. Lethal Strike. Every 12 seconds, the hero consumes 20% of current HP to trigger Lethal Strike one time, dealing 320% damage. So they buffed his talent, and now Lethal Strike does a straight up easy 320% damage all the time, which is really, honestly, a quite massive multiplier for something that happens every 12 seconds. Now, basic attack, he deals 100% damage, up leveled 120% damage to one enemy with a 15% chance to inflict bleed, but actually he inflicts bleed twice, so he doesn't have a 15% chance but a 15% chance times 2. Now the reason why is right here, Thirst for Blood. When his HP is below 60%, all attacks launched will hit the target 2 times in a row. This is really crucial. If you want to skill your Lugaru, get Thirst for Blood to max level. You want this HP threshold to be as high as possible. And also this 2 times in a row is really nice and really crucial. Now the story about this one is, it was actually his Awakening A1 before, but they've swapped it with the passive that gave him increased attack speed based on lower health. We're going to see that when we talk about the Awakenings. Now Feral Fury, when deployed, deducts 40% of the hero's current HP and increases damage rate by 40% immediately. So I think you can already see the synergy between Feral Fury and Thirst for Blood. It instantly puts him in the range for him to attack twice, as well as giving him a 40% damage increase that goes down to 15% over the span of 25 seconds. So it is a real burst advantage. Like, you put him in and he's already ready to deliver. Now lastly, we have Animosity. Reduces the cooldown of Lethal Strike by 9 seconds, so he's going to trigger his talent every 3 seconds, as well as allowing the Lethal Strike to ignore 30% of the defense of the targets that are inflicted with bleed. And this obviously goes on for 20 seconds. And yeah, honestly, a 30% defense ignore is always really strong, as in pretty much any type of content really. And also his Lethal Strike every 3 seconds is just a massive amount of damage, considering the fact it does 320%. Now, Awakening wise, what do we have here? His A1 is, as already mentioned, every 1% of max HP lost increases his attack speed by 2 up to 160. So at 20% max HP, he gets an additional 160 attack speed, which is really quite nice. And also something to keep in mind, even though if you even add the attack speed and you don't see a change in the attack speed interval, so we're going to peek into the build real quick. Even if you don't see a change in the attack interval, so going from, for example, minus 1.2 to minus 1.3 seconds, the attack speed interval still changes, even though you can't see it. So more attack speed is always good, and there's no case in which more attack speed doesn't have an impact on your character. Alright, next. Awakening 2 is pretty standard, 5% attack is very solid, and honestly also stronger than, for example, just giving him a flat out 300 attack, because with the 5% and the 6100 base attack, he gets slightly more than 300 attack through this one. And obviously this adds to the base stat, so it's only going to get multiplied by the gear, as well as his A3 being when Animosity is in effect, so his ultimate, he ignores an additional 20% defense of targets with bleed, so going up to a 50% defense ignore, which is kind of the only numbers we really see from people like Silas. So this defense ignore is really nice. And then we have the A4, which is 8% penetration, so it just allows him to penetrate defense and penetrate resistance in general. And then we have probably the worst one, which is going to be the A5, which allows this Lethal Strike, so every 12 or every 3 seconds an ultimate, to stun the target for a single second. I don't really see a need for this A5, and it's also a good thing, because if you need a character from the Ancients 6 times to unlock his full potential, it would honestly be a wasted character. So yeah, we've talked about all those aspects. Let's get into gearing. Now for gearing, I'll do it a little bit different from now on. I'm going to straight up show the end game build, but talk about the substat requirements, as well as obviously the stats you're aiming for in general, and also set options in comparison to the set we're running. Also, I'm going to like put in some icons. It's going to take me a bit more editing, but at least I can make it look cleaner, I guess. Now, stat requirement wise, on the weapon, you're mainly looking for attack percent and crit rate. And the same goes for the chest piece, a simple attack percent and crit rate. Now, further stats you would be looking for on the chest piece would be crit damage. So attack percent, crit rate, crit damage. And on the weapon, it would be attack percent, crit rate, and attack speed. So some of you might be wondering, oh, why is there no crit rate on your weapon? That is because we get the crit rate from the other 4 pieces. As you can see, 26%, 25%, 24%, and again 25% crit rate. So this build is absolutely ridiculous and almost min-maxed, I guess. But there might still be something better. But I'm very certain in this build. This build is really good. Alright. So additional stats also, besides crit damage, what you want on your chest piece is just going to be attack, and this is pretty much a perfect chest piece. Or the attack could be attack speed if you find an ancient, or you could get crit damage on your weapon again if you find an ancient. So whatever you can kind of fit together, it's going to work. And set effect wise, Warlord is obviously the best choice because it gives you attack speed as well as attack percent. But other viable choices are still Annihilating Might, so straight up 35% crit damage boost, or a standard Calamity set, so you're just going to lose 30 attack speed, but you're still going to gain the 25% attack. Now, Whirlwind set is also an option, but I don't recommend it if you're already starting to get attack speed on your gear. So if you have attack speed on your ring, amulet, weapon, wherever, the closer you get to 200 attack speed naturally without set effect, the more useless Whirlwind set becomes. And I don't really recommend running a Whirlwind set unless you're really struggling with attack speed, then I highly recommend it. Alright, so now that we've talked about the left side, the only thing left is the right side. So right side gear, we have a Sorbonne Arcana set. Sorbonne Arcana set is by far the strongest when it comes to Lugaru for Guild Boss. And other options besides Sorbonne Arcana would be Infernal Roar for fights that aren't as long as the Guild Boss fight. So, for example, be it AMR or stages in general. And also then Ageless Wrath is an option you can pick. Though for Ageless Wrath you gotta keep in mind we have a split of attack percent as well as crit damage and crit damage here. If you're using an Ageless Wrath set, you should rather go for double attack percent, 1 crit damage, referring to the main stats. Because you're going to get enough crit damage from the set effect anyway, and you might as well then stack into attack speed instead of overstacking crit damage into attack. Alright, substat wise, it is rather simple. You're really looking for the best of the best here, which is going to be crit rate, crit damage, and attack speed. If you're not that far yet, you should be looking for at least attack percent with crit rate, and then either crit damage or attack speed. Even attack flat is still fine. Same goes for this piece, but just with swapped stats, so crit damage in the top instead of attack percent. And also for the last piece, same stuff. Also, if you can, you should also be looking for substats like rage region or attack flat as other examples, because they're going to help, but they aren't necessarily needed. Now, total stats. We've talked about the subsets, we talked about the sets. Briefly, we're going to get into the sets a bit deeper when it comes to the blue sets, so the sets below 19 stages, but let's talk about the stats you should be aiming for in general. HP wise, I would recommend getting 50% HP, so basically giving him around 38,000 HP, or then adding in the artifact HP and the collection progress. Something like 45,000 HP gives you a good base to go with, as well as makes him slightly more tanky. And you're going to see it when it comes to Guild Boss. It is really needed. But if you're not going to use him for Guild Boss, or you don't want to min-max him for Guild Boss, running him at anything from plus 2000 just from the chest piece to even plus, I don't know, 30,000 HP is totally fine. Attack percent wise, you want at least 150%. So at least plus 9000, and then anything higher is still fine. As you can see, we're running around 200% additional attack, which is really, really good. And you could also go higher, especially as already mentioned, if you're running an ageless rev set. Attack speed wise, it is rather simple. You want around at least 200, preferably something closer to 250. But you could also go past, as you can see, for example, here we are at 334 attack speed. Crit rate wise, at least 92.5%, honestly. Anything below 92.5% is kind of not enough, especially if you're running crit damage. And preferably you want something closer to 95, 97. But honestly, if you can do it, max out the crit rate. So a solid 100% crit rate. Crit damage is honestly not too important, but anything you have open, anything you can still put into crit damage is going to go into crit damage, which gives us a total of 230%. But anything from plus 150%, which is kind of just the double crit damage stat right here, up to the 230% is totally fine. So we've now talked about the stats. Let's talk about, before we get to the artifact, let's talk about the remaining sets. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to go into the filter, and I'm just going to talk about the blue sets. Inside, if you're really struggling with hitting the crit rate cap, then use an inside set, but keep in mind it is just crit rate. There's no real benefit to added damage, and it's going to lose out against most of the competition. So only use it if you're really, really struggling to hit the crit cap and you don't have any better options. Wisdom set. The wisdom set is only half nice because, as you can see, it increases the damage dealt by 35% for 10 seconds. But Lugaru's ultimate, for example, also goes on for 20 seconds, so you're kind of wasting 10 seconds, as well as his basic attack staying very, very bad. So I don't recommend running a wisdom set on him. Doom set. Doom set is honestly a really good option. He does single target damage. The Doom set boosts single target damage. So running a Doom set is very nice and probably in the top 3 when it comes to the blue sets in general. Styx, you can forget about it. He doesn't do AoE. Night Terror. Night Terror is most likely the best set for him, so it just gives him a 25% damage boost as long as he crits, and he will crit if you give him enough crit rate. So Night Terror is probably the best set to pick if you are still not at golden sets, or your golden sets are on other characters. Glacier. We've already briefly talked about the space HP and about HP in general. If you're running a Glacier set, the Glacier set can work because he has a massive 25,905 basic HP. But you gotta keep in mind, additionally to all the substats we've talked about, preferably you want additional HP percent in a substat. So something like this ring, for example, giving us HP percent, and or even this weapon over here also giving us HP percent. So you really gotta look for HP percent if you want to make the Glacier set work, which just adds on to the stat requirements already. Hawkeye doesn't work. For Hawkeye to work, you would need to cut down his attack interval to 1.2 seconds, but that is just not realistically possible, so just stay away from Hawkeye set, as well as considering the fact that getting a Hawkeye set is fucking tedious. Alright, Fracture. For the Fracture set, it's kind of the same thing I told you about the HS Ref set already. You should go away from running 2 crit damage main sets and just swap to running 2 attack percent main sets, so you can kind of balance out the fact and not go into over crit damage, so into like overstacking crit damage. Alright, enough of that. Let's talk about the last few remaining sets. Obviously Curse falls out because he's not going to attack multiple targets. And Fatality is a good set. You can just use it on him. It's going to do some work, giving you 3% attack as well as some more defense and magic res ignore. But he already ignores enough defense through his ultimate or even his A3. As well as the Fatality set just being super, super hard to acquire, because the higher you go in the stages, the lower the drop rates for the Fatality set actually becomes. Alright. There was a lot of talking, but we've talked about all the important aspects when it comes to gearing Lugaru. Now it's time to actually show him off in some content. Alright, this could have been the point where I show him in in Nightmare Faction Trial, but I've used him in Nightmare Faction Trial. He worked, he was able to eliminate the enemies, but as you can see, apparently on test server we only have a single entry. I didn't realize that. I cleared the stage 12 using Lugaru in the team, and yeah, it didn't work, but it's quite obvious he is going to be good for the Nightmare Faction Trial. Alright, outside Nightmare Faction Trial, we still have a couple of things left to talk about, which is going to be gear rate. So, obviously we already know about Gear Dungeon, but I can't yet talk about it because not only is the mode not released, but also test server stuff. And yeah, gear rate 1, 2, and 3. He's going to be able to stop the first waves when it comes to gear rate 2. So, he's working there, and then you just combine him with an AoE mage, and he's going to be able to slap. As well as in Gear Rate 1, if you're truly running a Nightmare Faction team, preferably something with Torador, Hatset, so very legendary heavy, he can put in some work, but honestly, Gear Rate 1 and 2 are better left to AoE marksmen or AoE mages, and Gear Rate 3 is honestly nothing where ground hitting unit can succeed, so Gear Rate wise he isn't really a good choice. Now that we've established the fact that he isn't good in gear rate, obviously there's a special place for every fighter in this game, and that is going to be AMR. There's a couple different approaches you could take to AMR. You could, for example, use Brock here, you could use Oleg, you maybe not have a Constance, so you might be relying on a healer, but we're just going to take a simple approach of using Lugaru, using Brock here to block the boss, and then just showing off his damage a bit. And if you take a look at his HP, even though it doesn't look like it, this is actually 60%, looks more like 70, but who am I to judge? So yeah, we're just going to let the boss get close, activate Lugaru, and then already place an abomination. So yeah, as you can see, he's hitting for 237,000, which was his lethal strike, and then around 67,000 and going slowly lower, double hits. And yeah, why is it going lower? That's because of his passive, which goes down by 1% per 2 seconds. But yeah, enough of this. Let's just let him sort this one out, and then we can just bring in Constance after the ultimate is finished. So yeah, Constance is just going to keep him alive. And for the devastating strike, even though Constance is most likely going to save him, we're just going to activate Brocky for the damage reduction just to make sure he doesn't die. But I'm very, very certain that wasn't actually needed. So yeah, here we're just going to wait it out, let the boss attack. As you can see, Lugaru is already back to full HP. And then right here, we're going to activate his ultimate, activate Constance. The interesting part about Constance is in Inspiration, she stops healing. So Lugaru gets that chance to slowly cut down his HP. But we weren't quite able to have him really show his worth again. And obviously there's a couple of tips and tricks how to maximize his potential, keep him at low HP. But you just really gotta dive into that a bit more. So damage wise, as you can see, he completely dominated. He did 7.7 million. And if you're now wondering, did I just give shit gear to Wrath and Abomination? We can take a look at their gear. And honestly, Lugaru is strong. But yeah, Abomination first. As you can see, 88k Abomination. Pretty similar stats to Lugaru. Obviously 5% less crit rate than needed. Or than wanted, but Wailing Skull on 25, and again we are keeping in mind Rammed here doesn't really work for AMR on Lugaru, so he was kind of handicapped a bit. And then we had the Wrath with also pretty solid stats, as well as a Scarlet Hunt. So that is AMR. Now obviously onto Guild Boss, the main attraction. Guild Boss time it is, so here we go. As you can see, double Purple Lord, so Lunaria as well as Wrath, and also Salazar and Arrogance. Salazar a bit helping out with the bleeds, but nothing really too necessary, especially if we're keeping Lugaru low, which is what we're going to do. And also an Elowin team, so we're running an Elowin to help out with keeping Lugaru alive when we want to keep him alive, as well as then another 3 ranged units, in this case Setram, Hex and Silas. Silas and Hex are A0 and Setram is at A5. But that's just because I didn't find another Setram, so I wasn't able to put him to A0. But that's not really too crucial. So, before we go into the fight, we need to talk about gear. I'm going to show you a run which is going to be almost as min-max timing as you're going to probably get it, with really close calls when it comes to HP, which is why it's really important that you're running him at 45,000 and 100 HP, as well as a 20% Pantheon bonus. So if you really want to copy this, or you would like, if you want to copy it point for point, do have at least 45k HP. If you are fine with making slight adjustments, you should be fine with going a bit lower, going a bit lower. But enough of that. So 45k HP for this run. After this, I'm going to also show you a run with increased awakenings, so A1 and A3, but not the complete run, just the screenshots of to see how high he was able to get. And then lastly, I'm going to finish it off with a casual run for someone that doesn't have 45k HP but still wants to use Lugaru. But you gotta keep in mind, this is the way to min-max him, and you're going to have less potential on a Lugaru that isn't running as much HP. But enough of the talking, let's get to walking the walk. Let's do this fight. We are already on the right side, so I'm not hiding any ultimates. And yeah, as long as Guild Boss loads, we are ready to go. Alright, we are in. So, we're going to just start it with Lugaru and boost him with Wrath. So Wrath is running an Invigoration set, so Lugaru has an Invigoration set, and we're going to give an Invigoration buff to Hex. So Lugaru and Hex are both Invigoration buffed. And then we're just going to bring in the rest of our units, really. Alright, we've established all our units. And now is again the point when it comes down to precise timings. We can just trigger Hexy because he's already ready. And for those that have watched the Valeria guide already, you might recognize it. But at 4 minutes and 29 seconds, we're going to trigger Lugaru. And also, obviously, you have the timings on the left right there. So yeah, we've triggered our Lugaru. We're going to trigger Sealers, going to trigger Dolores and everything else. And as you can see, he's chilling at basically 1% HP, being super low. And right about here, around the middle of the meteorite impact, is when you're going to activate your Eloin. The important part here is that the cleanse happens before he gets hit, so we can use the burns to keep his HP a lot lower, and also to buy Eloin some time to heal him up, because if you don't heal him enough, he's just going to die through the impact. So yeah, with this established, we can just go to 2x speed, let it go. And I did a run before, and Dolores wasn't having none of the timings. So that's why we are here on try number 2. So yeah, the timings for him are rather simple. One's 429, as you can already see it over there. It is just him straight up using his ultimate all the time. The only interesting part is the use of the Eloin, Wood Elf Sprite, however you want to call it, as well as obviously her own ultimate. So yeah, as you can see, we are able to, at least for the moment, have 100% uptime on him being below 60% HP, which is obviously really, really good, as well as a huge damage increase for him. So now again, the Shriek keeps us nice and low. And for the meteorite impact, what you really want to do here is try to cut it very close. So as close as possible. So for example, at the eye of meteorite, we're going to bring in the Wood Elf, and the goal here is for it to really allow, number one, to keep him low, as well as heal him up and prepare him HP wise for the Shriek that is going to come in right about now. So as you can see, another Infernal Roar. So yeah, he's now down to around 25% HP, and the part is, if you've done everything correctly, your Lugaru should be able to survive this, as well as the following burn effect. It's going to be super close, but as you can see, our Lugaru is still alive, chilling at around 1% HP. And we didn't need to actually activate Eloin, which is obviously really, really beneficial. Here we're going to just hold off on Dolores, not just to make Lugaru look better, but to also incorporate Satrum's and Salazar's ultimate. And one important part, we're using Satrum's exclusive artifact. Keep in mind, if you're not running a Rage Region comp, don't run this artifact, because it makes Satrum's ultimate longer than your actual Dolores ultimate, which is really, really bad for his damage. Only if you can spam Dolores, trigger her multiple times, and like I already said, are running a Rage Region team, is it actually worth it to that? So enjoy this bit of trivia, I guess. Alright. Infernal Roar again doing its thing, keeping our Lugaru nice and low. And here it's going to be kind of the same play, but instead of on the T of Meteorite Impact, we're just going to do it on the T of Impact, just to buy a tiny bit more time for the sprite to make sure that Lugaru doesn't die on impact, which is obviously the biggest danger right here. Alright, so let's continue on with this. Again, straight up triggering Lugaru, triggering Dolores. And as you can see, the timings of Lugaru line up really nicely with Dolores. And here the play is, we're again going to obviously survive the meteorite impact. And we're going to try to keep it as close as possible with the cleanse of Elowin. So we're going to try to wait for him to almost die, and only at that point really cleanse. So that would be right here. Shortly before he dies, we're actually going to cleanse him. And now it's obviously time to deal with the shield, which is also a good point where you would kind of really want to save up some ultimates, so we're able to successfully deal with it. So as you can see, for kind of the first time in this fight, we're actually above 60% HP. So we're losing a bit of damage on Lugaru, but that's just forced. We would be kind of forced to lose him, which obviously is a bad trade-off. So now for the last 46 seconds, again it's just an Infernal Roar, and here we're actually going to use Elowin to keep him alive. So we're kind of, because Elowin heals a bit less than the sprite, and also we don't really want to cleanse the burn, we want to use the burn to keep him low. So we activate Elowin. As you can see, he's barely alive. The Elowin healing plus the healing from Dolores, as well as the sprite, just are able to keep him alive, keep him low. And then right here we again have Infernal Roar. So interestingly enough, you really gotta make use of the Infernal Roar when it comes to keeping your units nice and low. And here we're just again going to activate the sprite, just because we can't afford to lose Lugaru. And now it's closing in on the last couple of seconds, so we're going to activate him one more time. And this concludes the run. Let's have a look at the damage, see how how it went, and yeah. Lugaru at 86 million damage, which is really solid, as you can see, beating out an Arrogance and honestly equal gear, as well as also the same artifact, beating out a Silas, also in cracked gear, 25 artifact, even his exclusive artifact. And what you gotta keep in mind for Hex right here is this Hex was actually running his exclusive artifact. All right, let's not talk about the builds too much. Let's actually look at his competition's builds. All right. So we're going to keep our normal Lugaru build in mind. Obviously, pretty good build, but also his competition has pretty nice builds. So as you can see, a rant here. Now, for Salazar, I believe, yeah, we were using the wrong set. We should have used a Sorbonne Arcana set. So the main reason we weren't able to break 50k is because Salazar's set was a bad set. Alright, so here you have Silas. As you can see, 270% crit damage, 95% crit rate, 270 attack speed, and then obviously rather low attack, as well as obviously a 25 exclusive artifact. Same goes for Hex, 25 exclusive artifact, 312 attack speed, 95% crit rate, 238% crit damage, and again around 200% attack. So his competition, it isn't the fact that his competition was bad. Arrogance, 240 attack speed, 230% crit damage, 98.5% crit rate, 10k attack, as well as also a 25 ram tier. And then obviously Salazar running an unfortunate set choice here. So that's why his damage was a bit sad. And if you're interested in the Dolores stats, as you can see, no set effect, 46% rage regen, as well as a casual 10k attack, which is also quite helpful when it comes to her healing, and also a keen wisdom as an artifact, and 3 healing effect. And also the attack speed doesn't really affect her in any way, shape, or form. Alright, before I completely forget about it, here you go, the Elowin build. As you can see, she really isn't anything special. If I had to describe her, I would say rather low attack, being below 200%, rather low attack speed at 220, and almost non-existent healing effect with a slight rage regen increase, and also an euphoric orb increasing the attack speed of all heroes in range. Alright, now on to the part with the awakenings. How strong are they? And before we get to that, if you've made it to this part of the video, please leave a like, consider subscribing, it would greatly help me out. And enough with the emotional rambling, let's get onto the test results. As you can see, we are running an A3 Lugaru. Obviously, I've tested the results at A1 before and then upgraded him to A3. And also, I still have an A0 copy ungeared lying around. But enough of that, here we go. 13 million. The difference between A0 and A1 came out to be 13 million, mainly because the increased attack speed allows him to attack more, which especially if he's low health gives the double hits. And also if he's attacking faster, he's getting rage faster, which shifts his timings just a teeny tiny bit, which buys us between probably 2 to 4 seconds, more like 3 seconds towards the end of the fight where we activate his ultimate, which doesn't go completely through, but still allows probably 1 or maybe even 2 lethal strikes to slip through his ultimate, and in general then obviously leads to this huge boost in damage. Now, surprisingly enough, A3 only has an increase of 2 million. So there's one thing that could have changed, and that's Dolores RNG. There might have been a time where Dolores didn't trigger, but the general conclusion still stays the same. And for that one, we need to take a look at the awakenings. So what do the awakenings even do? So the A1, we've already talked about it, the increased attack speed. The A2 is 5% attack. So he's just going to do pretty much 5%, then multiplied whatever stats he has, % more damage. And then the A3, which gives him even higher defense ignore by 20%. Now, the reason why we don't really see the results too big is considering it's mainly because of the fact that his attack is already incredibly high. He's already sitting on 21,000 total attack, as well as already having an inbuilt before 30% defense ignore, and especially considering the fact that the guild boss itself, especially Nightmare 4, has, in comparison to everything else in the game, rather low defense. The best way to probably take advantage of having Lugaru at 3 would be even more crit damage actually. So potentially swapping out this attack % piece for a crit damage piece and giving him even more crit damage. But that's also only if you have a lot, like really high amount of attack. And the most important part is that his A3 isn't really good for guild boss, because you don't really feel the impact, but outside of the game it's still going to be massive against whatever you're fighting, especially if it's high defense enemies, for example like Arena. So this concludes his awakenings, and then let's cut to the last part, which is obviously going to be a more fairer guild boss of Lugaru, which doesn't need to rely on 45k base HP. So see you there. Alright, and as promised, honestly, let's get to the last part of the video, which is going to be a Lugaru run with low HP. So as you can see, 5,760. The stats are pretty similar. So let me just get the rammed here artifact real quick. So as you can see, the only real difference is a slight decrease in attack speed, as well as crit rate. But yeah, here we go. Oh yeah, let me move myself over again real quick. Okay, so it is kind of the same beginning. So just Lugaru, Invic boosting him, Invic boosting Hex, bringing in Dolores, bringing in Silas, bringing in Elowin, bringing in Sedgem, taking out the Invic booster, bringing in Arrogance, bringing in Salazar, and now comes the first change. We are actually not going to trigger at 429. We are going to trigger after the meteorite's impact. It is because we can't allow ourselves, or we can't really sustain an additional hit through his lethal strike. So we really can't afford him to reduce his HP further before the lethal strike. And then right here it's kind of the same timing, so Elowin again at around half, which is going to, as you can see, cut it really close. But yeah, that's the way it is. And what you really gotta keep in mind is the fact that if you have less HP, your character is also going to lose less HP. So for example, Lugaru's Lethal Strike here takes 20% of his current HP. And if he takes less HP through his Lethal Strike, also the healing from a Dolores is going to heal him more percent-wise. And we really need to go more... Basically, we need to go dangerously low when it comes to actually surviving certain instances here. And we just don't have enough or as much HP to play with, really. But besides that, timing-wise, it's in general the same thing. Even here, we can, again, kind of wait for, like, the eye of impact. Impact, yeah, there's only one eye, so that's good. And then here again, obviously restore some HP. And here's then the part where it gets changed again a bit. And that is, we're going to prematurely trigger Elowin to make sure that he doesn't actually die against the meteor. As you can see, it was rather close, so we do need to sacrifice a bit of our health. And as you can see, we are getting over the 60% threshold, so we're sacrificing some damage when it comes to hitting the shield here specifically. Obviously, it's not anything super major, but you really notice it in the damage. There's a big difference between Lugaru being below and above 60%. Alright, then here with the Infernal Roar, we are again super low. And we're going to go kind of follow the same logic, and just so we make sure we don't die, we're again going to place on the eye. Meteorite impact. And over here, just activate Lugaru again. And also here, early Elowin, so we can at least have the burn from the meteors help out in keeping him rather low. Which, as you can see, again, goes, I mean, I would say alright-ish, but yeah, see, we made it barely below the 60% threshold, really. Or did we? I don't even know. Right here again, the usual Infernal Roar. And then before the meteor even starts, that's when we're going to heal, just to make sure that we don't get slapped to death by this big ass meteor. And then here we should be able to at least squeeze in a couple of seconds when it comes to the ultimate. And here's where I fucked up. I should have healed him with the wood sprite. But yeah, let's have a look at how much damage he actually dealt in comparison. So if we keep in mind, on the min-max run it was 88 million. And here we have 72 million. So as you can see, the difference isn't super big, but we've lost out on around 16 million damage. Which obviously is a bit attributed to the set, but I mean, you've seen the fight, so yeah.